What every African needs to know before the May-Year Coordination Summit. While much of the world's attention was focused on conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, one of Africa's most important annual policy meeting quietly took place in Egypt. On June 24th and 25th, foreign ministers from all 55 African Union member states gathered in Alamein for the 49th section of the Executive Council. The job was not to make headlines, but to prepare the policies that Africa's presidents would consider during the May-Year Coordination meeting. Although this meeting received little international media coverage, many of the decisions discussed here will shape Africa's economic integration, peace and security efforts, institutional reforms, and the General 2063 implementation for years to come. What is the Executive Council? Many people confuse the Executive Council with the Assembly of Heads of State. The Executive Council is composed primarily of foreign ministers from every African Union member state. Unlike the Assembly, which is made of presidents and prime ministers, the Executive Council performs much of the technical and policy work for the African Union. Its responsibility include reviewing reports from African Union institutions, coordinating continental policy, preparing recommendations for heads of state, monitoring implementation of assembly decisions, reviewing budgets, overseeing Agenda 2063 implementation. I know we talk about Agenda 2063 in one of our videos. Please go and watch that. Considering appointments to AU institutions when necessary. So think about it as Africa's cabinet of foreign ministers. The council serves as a bridge between technical experts, ambassadors, and presidents. So why was this meeting important? This year's Executive Council carries unusual significance because it came immediately before the 8th May-Year Coordination meeting. Unlike the annual AU Summit held every February, the May-Year Coordination meeting focuses almost entirely on implementation rather than making new declarations. The emphasis this year was simple. How can Africa deliver results instead of producing new resolutions? That question shaped nearly every discussion. How can we deliver instead of producing more resolutions? Now, the work on 8 agenda items, I hope we can go through this one by one. Agenda item number 1. Institutional reform. The first major issue involved continual reform of the African Union itself. For years, African leaders have acknowledged that the AU suffers from slow decision-making, overlapping responsibilities, weak implementation, heavy dependence on foreign donors, and duplication among AU organs. The reform efforts originally began under former Rwanda President Paul Kagame. Then in 2024, Kenya President William Ruto became the AU champion of institutional reforms and has continued effort to modernize the union. Current priorities include reducing bureaucracy, improving accountability, clarifying responsibility among AU institutions, making implementation faster, improving financial management, strengthening oversight. Rather than creating new institutions, ministers discuss making existing institutions work better. And I think that's something many Africans want. Agenda item number 2 is sustainable financing. We talk about the 2% levy, and we're just going to talk about it in passing so that, because they have discussed this in the meeting. It's one of the longest running problems. The African Union remains, one of the longest running problems of the African Union remains money. For decades, large portion of AU peace operations and development programs have depended on external partners. The Executive Council revisited strategies to strengthen member state contributions, the 0.2% import levy financing mechanism, internal resource mobilization, long-term financial independence. These are the things they focus on. African leaders continue emphasizing that political independence should be matched with financial independence. That's just true. You can't depend on somebody to finance the African Union. Then another item that they discussed was Agenda 2063. Another major discussion centered on Agenda 2063. This is Africa's 50-year development blueprint. Rather than debating new goals, ministers examined progress toward existing objectives, including infrastructure, cross-border highways, railways, ports, electricity, interconnections, industrialization, adding value to African raw materials, developing manufacturing, supporting industrial parks, digital transformation, digital identity systems, artificial intelligence, digital trade, cybersecurity, youth employment, skill development, entrepreneurship, innovation, technology. These are all of the things we discussed on this agenda item. The emphasis throughout the meeting was implementation rather than planning. How you implement what you have discussed for years rather than try to plan new things. Agenda item number 4 was African Continental Free Trade Area. The Executive Council reaffirmed support for deeper economic integration on our AfCFTA. The discussion focused on eliminating non-trade barriers, simplifying customs, expanding regional value chains, encouraging intra-African investment, improving logistics, supporting private sector participation. Many ministers argue that Africa cannot achieve Agenda 2063 without fully implementing the AfCFTA. We discussed an entire video on what the AfCFTA is. Please go and watch that video so you understand what the AfCFTA is. Agenda item number 5 was the theme of the year. Every year, the African Union adopts a continental theme. And for the year 2026, the theme is ensuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. This year's discussion highlighted access to clean water, sanitation, irrigation, climate resilience, drought preparedness, cross-border river management. We talk about the Senegal River project where 3 countries manage the Senegal River without problems. Then we talk about They talk about investment in water infrastructure. Water, because that's the problem. Water security was presented as both a development issue and a peace and security issue, because competition over water resources increasingly contributes to instability. Look at the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. We talk about that in one of our videos. Go and watch it. And you see the concerns between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. Then the agenda item number 6 was peace and security. The Executive Council reviewed several ongoing conflicts across the continent. Topics included Sudan, the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and Libya. The ministers emphasized African-led mediation, preventive democracy, diplomacy, institutional order, humanitarian assistance, strengthening the African peace and security architecture. So, rather than focusing solely on military responses, discussions highlighted prevention and political dialogue as a way to prevent conflict. Then another important issue they discussed was regional economic communities, right? The major objective of the May coordination progress is improving coordination between the African Union and regional economic communities. These include ECOWAS, SADC, EAC, IGA, and you name the other regional organizations that they have on the continent of Africa. They want to improve coordination between them. The reason is simple. The reason they want to improve coordination between these organizations or the regional is simple. Because for years, overlapping mandates have delayed implementation of continental projects. The Executive Council discussed better coordination so regional organizations and the African Union complement rather than duplicate one another. Agenda item number 8 was African Business Forum. African Business Forum. Running alongside the political meeting was the African Business Forum. And the African Business Forum was very important because this reflected a growing recognition that government alone cannot finance Africa's development. Governments alone cannot finance Africa's development. So the African Business Forum focused on infrastructure investment, manufacturing, green energy, digital innovation, public-private partnerships, attracting African institutional investors, mobilizing pension funds, expanding private capital. This complements the African Union's efforts to make economic growth more investment driven. So that's private sectors and African institutions, financial institutions have to work together. So the question is, what happens next? What happens next? The Executive Council itself does not make the final political decision on many continental issues. Instead, its recommendations are submitted to the 8th May coordination meeting on June 27, where African heads of states and government consider them for adoption. The key announcement expected from that meeting include progress on AU institutional reforms, implementation of Agenda 2063, strengthening cooperation with regional economic communities, financing strategies, updates on peace and security, implementation of AfCFTA, follow-up actions on 2026 water security thing. So, although the 49th Executive Council did not produce dramatic headlines, it addressed many of the structural issues that will determine Africa's long-term trajectory, from institutional reform and financial sustainability to Agenda 2063, AfCFTA implementation, water security, and conflict prevention. The minister focused on turning existing commitment into measurable action. For observers of African governance, the importance of this meeting lies less in new declarations and more on whether the recommendations adopted in Alamein will be translated into concrete decisions by heads of state, and ultimately into implementation across the continent. So, folks, we try our very best to explain to you how the African Union works, and today we explain to you the meeting that just took place on the 24th and 25th in Alamein in Egypt, and some of the recommendations that have been submitted to the assembly for their consideration. So by the 27th, we'll follow that meeting, and then by the 27th, we'll bring you an update in what have been decided on all the issues or the recommendations that were made. Folks, my name is Pico Conway, and you're watching When the Dust Settles. On this channel, we discuss the African Union, what happened across the African continent. If you enjoy this discussion, folks, please subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and share it with your friends. Also visit our website. You'll see the website in the description below. Until next time, stay safe. I will talk to you when I talk to you. Bye for now.